Today, let's head into Excel Module 2, and now we're really going to dig into what Excel can do. So this is what the finished project is going to look like in our textbook. I want you to imagine there's a company called Claypore Engineering. I think they build super big buildings and design all of this great stuff for our downtown areas. And this is their salary report. They only have from rows 4 to 12, they have about 9 employees. Here's their email address. This is how many children they have. Why is that important? In the US, when you do salary, the more children you have, you get a wee bit off your taxes. From a mother of 6 children, I want you to know it is just so little that I could buy a pair of tennis shoes each year. So that's not too much, but it does matter a little bit. Here's how many hours they've worked. Probably, this is of course for 2 weeks because we're not allowed to work this many hours. You can see Savannah down here probably is part-time, and some of these people are full-time. Notice there's some purple involved. We're going to do something called conditional formatting and make anybody who's worked more than about 70 hours to turn purple. Why? A lot of companies don't want people to work overtime because they have to pay them time and a half or double time. So they're going to kind of remind them each week if they get close to that. Here's their pay rate. Clearly, these are good jobs. These aren't minimum wage by no means, but anybody with an engineering degree or associate would definitely do well. Gross pay means how much do they make over the 2 weeks before taxes. Here's their federal tax to Uncle Sam, our state tax to our governor, and what percentage of your paycheck goes toward taxes. Net pay means what's left after you pay some of those taxes, although this doesn't figure in paying for your health insurance and all those other things, but this is general. And what date were they hired? Down here, we're going to find out what amount was the highest out of all these, which amount was the lowest, which amount was the average. So I want you to go open your starter file for Excel, and we'll get started next. Well, I've typed in the beginning data. You'll find this up through table 2-1, same font, no different theme, just straight typing. So stop the video for a second, get this typed in, and then pop it back in. Next, I want to show you Flash Fill. And I know we only have like 9 employees, so this wouldn't save us like hours. But a lot of companies literally have, like at Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. I do some work for them out there, and they just on the main campus at that location, we have almost 50,000 employees. So I love when people say, hey, do you know so-and-so? Yeah, I have no idea. So if you had like 50,000 employees, this would be great. In fact, what we're about to do is create the email addresses based on a certain pattern. And we actually do this with the Virginia Community College system. We type in a way of layout, and then that's how you got your email address. Someone didn't pick it for you. It was generated. So let me show you how to do this with Flash Fill. I'm clicking in cell B4. And this guy's name is Benny Altor. So we're going to create his email kind of based on a system. We're going to use the first letter of his first name, in this case, B for Benny, his last name, Altor. And then I'm going to put an @ sign because all emails do, and their emails are going to be example.com. Probably not really, but in our example, true. So make sure you type that exactly right. If you misspell this, Flash Fill is not going to work for you because it won't see the pattern. Hit enter when you're done. Notice it turns like this blue. We call this a hyperlink, so that if we were to click this, it would fill it into your email. Let me just show you here real quick. So now it would fill that name right into an email if you have your email system set up. It turns purple to say, I've already been there. Hey, next, I want you now to click in cell B5. We're going to do the same thing. Linda, the first letter of the first name, by the way, that's an L and not a 1. Her last name is Fox @example.com. And again, make sure you don't misspell it. Now, once you get 2 of these in, the computer is kind of now looking at it going, I see a pattern. We're using the first letter of the first name and the last name at example.com. So we probably have enough. So what we're going to do, make sure you leave your mouse on B6. We're going to go up to the Data tab. And in the Data tab, we're going to look for Flash Fill. And where Flash Fill is located is in the Data Tools. I'm on a smaller laptop, so it doesn't actually say Flash Fill until I point at this tool. It does have a little lightning bolt if you're having trouble finding it. Click on Flash Fill and notice what it does down the page here is it puts J hand-filled in, B Jam, S Knocked, J Pitfield, J Spalding, S Tillman, O Wilson. Now it kind of got a little carried around here, and notice it has 2 extras here, so I'm going to go ahead and click there and delete that one. Head down one and delete that one as well because it got a little excited with all those cells listed there. So, but if you had thousands of employees, boy, would that help us out. Hey, next, head to table 2-6, and we're just going to type a few more things in here. We're going to type in totals. We're going to type in highest. We're going to type in lowest. We're going to type in average. Now, before we finish the typing, I want you to click on cell D3. D3 says hours worked. It gets a little cut off because I haven't made my columns wide enough. But there is a way to kind of stack up what data. They're called column titles where we kind of put them on top of each other. Let me show you how to make a title. I want you to click between hours and worked. And after hours, I want you to press down the Alt and the Enter key. Delete if you have an extra space in there. And what this allows me to do is look how now hours worked in cell D3 is kind of layered on top of each other. And we're going to do the same after hourly. I'm going to hit Alt, Enter, make sure I get rid of the extra space in there, hourly pay rate. And by doing this, my columns won't need to be as wide once I pull out the columns a little bit later. So we're going to do that on hours worked and hourly pay rate to make sure we've got that set up. Next, we're going to change the sheet tab name and the color now. Do you see at the bottom? It just says sheet 1. So I'm just going to double click on that. I want to call this the salary report. To make sure we know what this is. And once we get more sheets, maybe in the future, we'll have that. And I'm now going to right click on that and change the color of that tab color. The one that I'm going to pick here is blue accent 1. So that way we'll be good to go here. So we'll have that blue. Hey, next we're going to enter formulas, and something from last week I don't want you to remember, anytime we type in a formula, we must put an equal sign in. And if you look at the directions in your online textbook, and this is, I really want you to open that, look above figure 2-7 to the instructions that say to enter a formula using the keyboard, because I don't want you just to be typing. I want you to understand why are we doing this. Because in your assignment, you're going to need to understand why did you do that particular formula. So we'll come back here. Actually, I just realized I have these 2 cells over, so make sure you put those over there. Okay, we'll pick up in a second. I've clicked into cell F4 because I want to calculate the gross pay. And I'm about to type a formula here, so as you remember, you always must start a formula with an equal sign, but you need to start being able to understand, well, how do I calculate gross pay? Now, a couple of these formulas will give you, because you wouldn't know like what is the federal tax, but in this case, you should be able to, in your mind, be able to calculate, well, how would I get gross pay? So let's imagine you get a part-time job, you work 4 hours today, and you're being paid $7.50 an hour. How would you get gross pay? Well, if you work 5 hours, you'd multiply that by $7.50 to come up with how much money you made gross, but don't forget, typically they subtract some kind of tax once you make enough. So this is going to do the gross pay. So we learned last week we could have typed in D4 times E4. But I think the better way maybe to do this is to click on D4. It turns blue to make sure you have the right cell. Don't forget, times is the asterisk. It means multiply. And then click E4. It'll turn red. Now, before we hit enter, if you ever get the error when you're doing your homework that says circular reference, that means that you used the cell that you're in inside the formula. Let me give you an example here. If you accidentally typed in F4 in F4, it means circular reference. I can't be calculating what, inside the cell I'm in. So if you ever see circular reference, you shouldn't be typing the cell that you're inside of, in this case, F4. And we didn't do that. We have D4 times E4. When we hit enter right now, we get the gross pay. Notice we did not actually type in these values. Why? Well, we wouldn't want to type in the values because each week you're going to work a different number of hours and your pay rate could go up. So we always want to use cell references, and the cell reference is D4 and E4, just in case these amounts change. Of course, it'll do new calculations. Up here in the formula bar, it shows up at any time. You can double click on this cell to get back inside. Go ahead and double click right now to see that. So now we could type all of these formulas in, but I don't want to have to type every formula in. So we learned something last week called autofill. That's different than flash fill. And what that means, it can copy to relative where you are. So right now we've multiplied D4 by E4. In the next cell, I want to do D5 by E5 because that's row 5. I want to do D6 by E6. Make sure you're looking at your cells as I'm saying this so you understand. So I can use autofill. If you remember, that's the skinny little plus sign. That occurs when I click in the bottom right corner of F4. But it's going to copy relative to where I am. So in other words, instead of putting row 4 in all of these, it's going to do row 5, row 6, row 7. We call that relative reference. So as it copies down here, I'll pull it down to row 12, let go, and let me just show you what it's doing. I don't want you to just click and have no understanding of what's happening. Click in F5 and look up here. Do you see it really did do D5 times E5 to get this formula? And if I double click, I can see how we got that. So these formulas look great. If you look around, let's see if you can answer before I tell you. What's the last name of the person who's paid the least? It's a little hard to tell with all these decimals, so that's why we're going to clean it up later. It's Jam, I believe. But who is paid the most? So let's look around. It's hard to tell with the decimals, isn't it? So look around. Who's paid the most? I think it is Fox, and maybe Linda is the boss because they're paid the most. I don't know. But it is 2648. I think is bigger than the other numbers. It's hard to tell without the cells. So next, we're going to figure out the federal tax. And the federal tax that we're calculating right here, really, truly, the federal tax is really a very complicated formula in real life. So when we wrote this book, we kind of synthesized it and made it a little simpler. So you'll find that again above figure 2-7 if you want to look at it. So the formula we would give you, we wouldn't expect you to know this one. Gross pay, we would expect you to know, but how would you know federal tax unless you know that? So let me tell you what that is. G4, we're going to put an equal sign. We're going to put 0.26. This is like a government formula that they would create. We're going to put a time sign. We're going to put a left parentheses. Remember, parentheses are calculated first. I'm going to click on gross pay minus the number of dependents, that's C4. And then next, multiply it, asterisk, by 22.16. Do you see what I mean? You wouldn't be expected to have this memorized. The test or homework or SAM would tell you this particular one, but you would need to understand how to get gross pay. That's pretty standard. So now that you've got this formula, double check that you have the right one. I think I do. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter there. You should get the value of, in this case, 665.5077. Double check that you're the right number. The trouble is in Excel, if you do run wrong formula, then you get lots of wrong errors because you're copying it. And it can mess up all your final totals over here sooner or later. Hey, go get the skinny plus sign to get autofill going. We're once again going to do relative reference and copy this down. Hey, next, let's say do state tax. By the way, not all states have state income tax. Some examples are like Florida do not. I think Arizona does not. And there are other states that don't even have sales tax. For example, Delaware is probably our closest that doesn't have sales tax. So, but let's face it, they find another way to tax you. So we do have state tax. In Virginia, it's approximately about 4%. But in ours, here's how we're going to calculate ours. I want you to put an equal sign here. We're going to put 0.055 times, so the asterisk, F4, which is our gross pay. So in other words, this particular state does about 5.5% of theirs. Our state's about 4%, so ours is a little bit less than this. Hey, go ahead and click H4 and drag it on down. So there we get in those state taxes. The next one, how would I calculate what percentage of my money is going to taxes? So let me go ahead and tell you this one as well. This one we probably wouldn't expect you to do. We're going to add up the two taxes, federal and state. Do that first, so we'll put that in parentheses according to the precedence or order of operations. And we want to make sure we divide by F4. So what we're going to do here is put a parentheses and put in G4 plus H4. End of parentheses. These parentheses tell the computer to add this first because by the order of operations, if you remember back to maybe, I don't know, 5th and 6th grade, I think you learned that. You divide by F4. Notice, oh, purple. We finally get purple here. So go ahead and hit enter and copy it on down. I know these look like really high, like 30% of our money goes to taxes, which is pretty right. But really, by the time you get some refunds and stuff, it's closer to about 20-25% based on your tax bracket in the US. If you're curious, you say, isn't that one of the highest? Actually, out of the 30 richest countries, which of course we're one of in the world, we actually pay the lowest taxes. Who knew? Countries like in the Scandinavian region, like Sweden and oh, let's see.
I didn't understand that.
My phone's popping in here. Finland is paying only about, pays about 50 to 60%. But then again, those countries get free college. Wouldn't that be great? Free health insurance. When a baby is born, their parent or parents get to stay home for 2 years. And get paid for it. So I guess it all comes out in the wash. Now, I just mentioned to you the order of operations, and I want to kind of remind you again what that is here. So if you remember, I want to make sure that from 6th grade that you remember how to do the order of operations. So I just open OneNote here to show you. So I am going to draw here, let's say you have a simple math problem. I'll make it in sparkles. There we go. So let's say I have 3 plus 5 times 4. Real quick, what is the answer to this in math? Well, hopefully you know that there's this order of operations called please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. What's that for? It means you do parentheses first, exponent, which is, by the way, the little caret, like would do an exponent, like 3 caret 2 is 3 squared. Multiplication and division, and by the way, those are the symbols on the computer, are left to right, and addition and subtraction are left to right, but are done last. I hope you remember that from school. So in this case, I'll switch colors on us so you can kind of see. We would do this part first because you multiply before you add and subtract. So 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 3 is 23. So if I were putting my answer down here, I could put 23. So reason I'm showing this to you real quick is that's how a computer does math. And make sure you know that, because if you put your formula and don't consider the order of operations, it could actually do the math wrong because it is following those rules. So now we're down to net pay. What net pay is basically what do you have left? So we're going to do an equal sign here. We started out with gross pay. We are going to subtract the federal tax plus the state tax. And I'm putting that in parentheses so it adds up the taxes first and then subtracts it from your gross pay. And so if we start out over the 2 weeks with $2,626, after we subtract our federal and our state, we end up with $1,816. And sometimes if the math and formulas confuse you, you may want to just write it down the math and double check yourself. If I started out with this much and subtracted my federal and my state tax, what would I be left with? Just to double check. And something I want to remind you of here in Excel, always kind of do what I call a logic check. Does this answer make sense? In fact, I recently was teaching a class and we were trying to compute how fast the car was going. And the answer should have been like 55 or 60 miles per hour, right? Well, the student did the math wrong and it was like negative 385. Well, clearly that should have, clicked and gone, I don't think that's possible. But the student didn't notice that. So always kind of look at it. Does this make logical sense? And when I asked the student, I said, hey, how could this have made sense? And he said, oh, I thought we were backing up really fast. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not cool. So always make sure that these numbers are right. Like if we ended up with a negative paycheck, that's not really possible, right? So always double check as you go here. So what we're going to come back now and do in a second here, now that we have all of these done, we're going to come back and learn a little bit more in just a second. Now, if you remember from last week, we saw this symbol. It was called Autosum. It added things up. And this can help us with doing totals. But of course, it doesn't help us with other types of subtraction or something else. So we want to take advantage of that. Cell A13 or this row 13 is all about adding things up. And there's some things that wouldn't make sense to add up. We can't add up people's email addresses. I don't even know what that looks like. And even though, yes, we probably could add up how many kids or dependents there are, it just doesn't really make sense to do so. No one's wanting to know how many kids our company has. So, but hours worked would be important over the 2 weeks because maybe as people go on vacations, we would need to hire some people as part-timers or, in a single-use setting that they could, fill in the other hours that other people needs, maybe as a temp agency. So I'm going to go to the Home tab here, clicking on cell D13. And if you remember from last week, here's Autosum. You don't have to highlight the cells first. You just click at the bottom. It's going to add all the way up until it finds text. Hours work. Let's see if it works. The first time I click it, I'm going to call these the Las Vegas lights around the lucky numbers of the night here. And I think that's pretty true. So it's finding the sum of D4 through D12. Always double check to make sure that makes sense. Yep, D4 through D12. And when I click the auto sum the second time, it does add them all together. So in 2 weeks, all of our employees need to work about 616 hours for things to work smoothly. Now, I don't need to add up the pay rates, but I do want to add these 3 cells up. I want to add how much gross pay. That would be important so that I could send it to the government. If you don't send those checks to the government, they shut you down pretty quick. Same with federal pay, yes, and state taxes, you got to send those checks. And we have to make sure we have this much money in the bank in gross pay. So I'm going to highlight these 3 at once to show you. We can do all 3 of one of these at once by adding straight down. And when you select multiple cells like this, you only have to click auto sum 1 time. Voila. Doesn't make sense to add the taxes, but I do want to add the net pay. How much did our employees take home over the last 2 weeks? And since I'm just doing one column, I'm going to need to click it first to ask me, is it the sum of J4 through J12, the Las Vegas numbers or the marching ants, whatever you want to call those things, are marching around the right cells. And I click it the second time and it computes. And again, it wouldn't really make too much sense to calculate the date sum. Now, I do want to come up with a tax percentage that our company pays on average, but I can't add these to get there. So what I'm going to do is just click on this last cell and copy it down so it copies that last formula. And it does kind of give me this green little mark right here to say, well, the other ones you're adding up. Why aren't you adding up this one? It's trying to give you that this is inconsistent. I'm going to ignore that error, but usually if you do see one of these little green triangles, it means you've messed up. So make sure you look at that. But in this case, we don't want to find the sum, and it's confused that why aren't you finding the sum? It wouldn't make sense to add all the percentages together. Next, I want to do something really new that we haven't done before. I want you to go ahead and click on cell C14. What we want to do here is find which is the highest number of dependents, or who has the most kids, basically. Not who, but what's the number. So we may want to determine that. So we can kind of see, well, our company has between 0 kids and employees have up to, well, probably 3 in this case, right? But if we want to use these built-in formulas to compute the highest number in the range of numbers, because I know we only have, these 9 employees, but in real life, you might have millions. So for example, in Lynchburg City, if you count just the city without the college, like Liberty, we have about 85,000 residents inside the city. If we were trying to find who makes the most pay, I wouldn't want to look through 85,000 different numbers and determine. So there's got to be a better way. So we're going to use these built-in formulas. Let me show you where they are. So click on cell C14. Everybody look up here. You may have had a math class in the past where you've seen this before. This is called f of x, and we just call it a function. And in Microsoft Excel, Microsoft has put about 300 built-in functions to assist us. Now, we're not going to need all of them. We've actually used one of them so far. It was called sum. I just didn't tell you that was a function. But now we're going to look one that represents the highest, but it's not going to be called highest. Let me show you. So now when I click on this f of x right here, whatever computer you're on right now shows you the most recently used on your machine. And for some of you, you may have never used Excel before, so that wouldn't help you. So always hit this down arrow, even if you're in a lab, and always go down to all. You just want to make sure you can see the one you need. And then this lists from A to Z of those 300 functions. Now, if you look under highest, you're not going to see anything. There's a mathematical word that means highest, and maybe you're thinking of it right now. It's called maximum. So I want you to scroll down and find maximum, but you won't find the full word maximum. They've shortened it a little bit. It's just MAX, and don't pick max A, it's just max. And it tells you right down here what this means. Returns the largest value in a set of values, and it ignores anything like text. So I'm going to click OK here. And then I'm going to move this over by clicking on the title bar to drag it over. It guesses which cells should I be looking at, what the highest of what. I want to tell you that 99% of the time, this guess is wrong. In fact, it's wrong. Look at it. C4 through C13. Now, let's look at that. C4 is right. But look, C13, there's nothing there. So here's what I always do. I will take the big fat white cross and click on the cells that I want it to look through. So the highest of where are these children? I'm going to click from C4 down to C12 to put the flashing Las Vegas numbers, the little line that it's going around the correct values. And that's really C4 through C12, or you could have typed it in here. So it's already telling you right here what the highest number of kids or the maximum number of kids. Always look at that before you hit OK just to make sense. Does that look right? If not, maybe you pick the wrong formula or you have the wrong range of cells. Click OK, and we get the number 3. Make sure you're actually doing this and not just typing in a 3. When Sam grades this, it's truly looking at those values right there. And if you haven't already done it, highlight these 3. Make sure they're right justified. I think they should be. So I'm making sure they're on the right side. You're probably already there. So now that we have these numbers built in, before I copy, I'm going to work on the lowest. So now I'll click on C15, and I'm hoping you don't even need to listen to me for this because you should kind of know what to do, I'm hoping. So just like we did before, we clicked F of X. We make sure it says all right here. And the opposite of maximum or highest is lowest, but there's not a lowest term. I bet you're already thinking minimum or MIN. So in a mathematical term, the smallest means MIN for minimum, and this does return the smallest number. Click OK, and it guesses totally wrong this time. It says, hey, do you want me to find the biggest number in C14? Or the smallest number in C14? No, that's not the smallest number. So when you get this to pop up, take your big fat white cross, go from C4 to C12, and let go. Make sure it says C4 to C12. And let's see if what it's guessing is right. Oh yeah, there's a 0. That's right. So click OK. We're doing it well. And let's do average as well. So we're going to click F of X right here, making sure it says all. Average is really truly average. So find the word average and make sure you don't pick anything close to that. It's got to be truly average. Another word that you're going to see, let's say on your SATs, is called an arithmetic mean. This means we're actually adding up all the numbers and dividing by the number of numbers. The opposite of this would be like the median, which is the middle number if we lined them all up in order. So let's click OK. And again, it guesses which range. It's always pretty much wrong. So again, highlight from C4 to C12, click OK, and make sure, you say, well, how can we have 1.444 kids? Well, we really can't. So it's the average number though. Now that we have these 4 formulas in here, I want to copy them over. So what I'm going to do is highlight these 3, and you can use autofill with lots of them, like kind of we did in the last chapter. We're going to copy this over to net pay. And what this is going to do, relative reference to where we are, it's going to compute the highest hours worked were 80. The lowest was 42.5. The average people work about 68 hours. And all of these values are the highest, lowest, and average of their perspective column. Hey, this might be a good time to take a break. So go stretch, move about, and we'll pick up in a second. Now, this is what our final project's going to look like, but ours right now does not look like that. So let's take some steps of formatting this worksheet to kind of get it in that look. So first, we're going to change the worksheet theme. Remember doing this in Word, right? So to do that, we are going to go under the Page Layout tab at the top. And let's just click on Themes. Right now, it's the Office theme by default. But we're going to go over 2 more and pick the gallery. Notice it changed the font. And hey, look at these. The email addresses are now red. So now let's hit, if you hit the 2 keys, Control and Home, it'll take you to cell A1. And what we want to do here is we want to put clay pour engineering across the top centered. And if you remember how we did that from last section, we go with a big fat white cross from A1 to K1, go to the Home tab, and we want to click on Merge and Center. This really just becomes a giant cell that we can work with. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Big fat white cross, go from A2 to K2. Click on Merge and Center. So now we just have a very, very large one. Now we're going to go ahead and highlight from A1 to A2. Really, this is just highlighting 2 cells because they're super large. And we're going to go try what we did in the last chapter. Remember, we went to cell styles. Notice you can see this new theme called gallery. Notice how it's pink, purple, and blue and red, so very different than it was. We're going to go ahead and pick title for these two cells, A1 and A2. And then just click on A2, just this salary report, and we're going to decrease, right now the font size is 18, but we're just going to make that second line a little smaller. Right here is a button in the Home tab font grouping, the smaller A, called Decrease Font Size. Be careful just to click it one time, and it should change things to size 16. That's what I want to do here. So I'm going to go back and highlight these two cells again, cells A1 and A2, and I'm going to change their background color. Let me show you where that is, not the text, but behind them. So what I'm going to do here is go to this paint bucket in the Home tab called Fill Color. Hit the down arrow to the right of that. Notice again our new colors coming from that gallery theme. And the one that I'm going to pick is actually, it's the indigos. Indigos are over here. I'm going to pick this one right here, Indigo Accent 5, later 80%. It's just a little bit of a purpley blue on the background. And I also want to click the Borders tab. The Borders tab is in the Home tab font group. And the one that I want to pick is called the Outside Borders. It's about a third of the way down. And what that's going to do, if I click off of it, it's just going to put a little edging on the cells on the outside borders to surround that title and that subtitle. So next, I want you to highlight from A3 to K3. And make sure when you're doing this on your test coming up in a few weeks and all these different things, don't just click row 3 because you don't want to do these outside cells here. What happens is if you, let's say, highlighted these all the way out to row 16,000 or column 16,000, when you go to print this on a real live printer, it would print millions of pages because there was something outside this area. So be careful just to literally highlight these cells and not beyond it. So what I want to do through here is go to the cell styles. On this one, I'm going to go to heading 3. Notice that changes the font a little bit, puts like an underline, kind of like a bright fuchsia or pink. And we're also going to click the center button in the alignment group for that same column. I know they're shoved up against each other, but soon they won't. So under the Home tab alignment group, hit the center button. And we also want to highlight from A13 to K13. I know K13 doesn't have anything, but go ahead and do that. We're going to go to Cell Styles and pick the total. And this kind of, you know how usually when you're doing a list of addition, you draw that line at the bottom, kind of makes that total. We're also going to highlight from A14, in this case, to A16, the highest. A14 to A16. And, oh, sorry, this is A14 to A16, sorry. A14 to A16 is right here, guys. A14 to A16. And we also, let's make sure we did that totals last time. I don't think that took. So make sure I go back and do cell styles. Actually click total, not just hover over it. And now A14 to A16, let's go ahead and make that bold. So, because those are super important right there. Hey, next, you know, the numbers are kind of really difficult to read. Remember when we were trying to figure out who makes the most? It was really kind of tough. So I want you to highlight from K4 to K12. We're going to work on these dates. And what I want to be able to do is we're going to go up to the Home tab to the number group. And this little tool right here is called the number launcher. It's got a little arrow on it. Pop that out. What we're going to do on the left side is make sure date is selected. It probably is. And I want you to change it from the first one that probably spelled out to 2012 to the one that just says 3/14/12. This gets rid of the extra 2012 and stuff that you typed in. So now they're a little bit shorter. So this originally, if you looked in the book, said 2010, and now it just says 10. So it doesn't have extra typed cells there. And then highlight from C4. So C4 to down to C16. And we are, C4 to C16. And I want you to click on the center button now. Go ahead and center these dependents. And then click E4 to get out of that range. So now we want to worry about our numbers a little bit. It's hard to tell if these are dollars, like kids aren't dollars, although they cost money. You don't want a dollar sign instead of $3 dependents. So we want to identify what's numbers and what's not. So we're going to identify from E4 to H4. These are the top rows of all the money except for net pay. So we want to make net pay also $1. So we're going to hold down the control key, if you remember from last week, and that allows us to click J4. So you highlight E4 to H4 first, hold down control, and then click J4. What we're going to do to this particular range of numbers, and that allowed me to click that non-adjacent range, we're going to click the accounting number, and let me show you where that is. We are going to go up to the Home tab in the number group. Click here on that dollar sign to make it called the accounting number. And notice what it did. It's putting the dollar sign 2 places past the decimal. But I don't want numbers to be everywhere. So what I'm going to do is do the other ones. Highlight from E5, in this case, to G12. Hold down that control key. Let's highlight the numbers that represent money in between. So let's highlight from E5 to H12. Hold down the control key to get these net pay, which is J5 to J12, noticing these other numbers aren't money. We don't want dollar signs everywhere, so we're going to come up and click up here on the Home tab and number on the comma style. And again, that makes them 2 places past the decimal. It includes the comma if they're over 1,000. So it looks much more cleaned up there. So now that we have that done, next let's come down and highlight from D4 to, let's see, D4 down to D16. And let's also click this comma style. The reason we're doing that is that they'll all have 2 places past the decimal. So now they're starting to get cleaned up here. Next, we're going to highlight from E14 to H16 and hold down control to do the 3 net pays over here. And we're now going to show you something called a floating dollar sign. So instead of picking this one, we're not going to pick accounting, so don't click the dollar sign. Go to the Home tab number, hit this launcher again, and let me show you another way to do this. On the left, we're going to pick currency, but instead of putting little negative signs, we're going to pick this third one down here. What this actually does, you'll get 2 decimal places, you'll get the dollar sign, but if we get any negative values, it'll put the negatives in parentheses, which stand out a lot more on a spreadsheet. Sometimes a little negative sign looks like dust on the spreadsheet, and it's a big deal. So this means you're not doing well as a company. You're losing money. So you're at negative $1,234.10. So when you click OK here, even though I know this looks the same as this, notice these numbers up here have the dollar sign way out in front, where these are floating right in front of the digit. Let's also highlight these 3 values and hold down control and do the net pay. We also want floating there, so let me show it to you again. We'll go down to currency and pick this third one down, click OK. So now we have these values in here. We also want to change the tax percentages. So to do the tax percentages, let's highlight everything in I from I4, in this case to I16. We're not going to actually do the average, so we're going to go ahead and delete I16 here. We're going to just highlight from I4 to I15. So we want to do the percentages. I know 0.03 can be switched to a percent. I can multiply it by 100, add the percent sign, but there's a symbol that does that. So from I4 to I15, come up to the Home tab in the number group. Go ahead and click this percent sign. Now, by default, it just kind of gets rid of all the decimals, and that's not detailed enough for me. So I want to show at least 2 decimal places past because they all look too close. So to do that, this is where you can increase and decrease decimals. This first one increases, so if I click it one time, notice it adds 1 decimal place. If I click it the second time, and it does round up. So if it's like, 5 on the end, and the next number is a 9, it would go up to 5 6. So it does do that. Hey, next is one of the more challenging things in this chapter. So really, really listen up. It's called conditional formatting. And let me show you where it is on the ribbon. It's on the Home tab under conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is where when you want something to kind of pop out on your spreadsheet to really make it well known. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to highlight from D4 to D12. And I'm in the situation that I don't want to pay overtime. Overtime is when people over 2 weeks work more than 80 hours. Most companies have to pay, by law, time and a half. So any hour over the 80 hours over 2 weeks, I'd have to pay them, instead of, let's say, $10 an hour, I have to pay them $15 an hour. And some companies do double and triple time. My daughter is a nurse at Virginia Baptist. And if she works like Christmas Day, where they need nurses every day, she gets paid like triple time. So sometimes they do that. Well, this company does not want to do overtime. So they want to tell employees when they kind of get close to above 70 hours to let them know. So here's what we're going to do. Highlight from D4 to D12. Click this conditional formatting. And this does some cool things. For example, if I hover over data bars and do the first, I can put little bars in here of different colors. I can do them different colors, and they're just not random colors. The bigger numbers are, let's say, green, and the lower numbers are red. So you can do all kinds. But the one I'm going to go down is I'm going to create a new rule based on what I'm doing. So click conditional formatting and new rule. And every single time you're going to do this, we're always going to pick this second one. Format only cells that contain. And let me tell you what I'm trying to do. If anyone works more than 70 hours, I want this to turn a special color automatically. So I know to walk up to them and say, hey, just wanted to remind you not to work so much. Go home. So let's come down here where it says cell value. And by default, it says between. Well, I'm not saying between. I'm saying more than 70 hours. So drop down the between, and another way to say more than 70 hours is to say greater than. But always double check, did they say greater than or equal to or greater than? In our case, it is greater than, but they're both listed there. After you click greater than, it gets rid of the 2 squares and puts in you can type in 70, but don't hit OK yet. If we just hit OK, nothing happens. We haven't told it to make it a new color or make it flash. So I'm going to click on this format button right here. And it says, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to switch the font? Do you want to switch the size, the color? Well, what I am going to do is I'm going to go under this font tab. It's probably already open right here. Do you see what I mean by the font tab? And I want to pick a color. So come down to this color right here, drop it down. I'm going to pick white. Now you're like, white? Corinne, this is like a poodle in a snowstorm. If I pick white right now, it's going to do a white lettering with a white background and you won't see it. Well, I'm going to do more than just pick white, but go ahead and pick white background 1. I'm also going to change the background fill color. Next, click on fill up here. We're going to pick, based on our theme, this third to the end one. This one over here, it kind of looks like a purple. It's purple in the column 8, row 1. So click on that purple. It'll do a sample down here. And now, so we have the font is white. We have our purple. So now when I hit OK, it shows me a preview. Does everybody see this purple background, white lettering? It hasn't done it yet, but here's what it's going to do. It's going to make any number, as soon as it gets over 70, automatically, you won't have to click anywhere when they get over 70 hours, even 70.01. So when I hit OK, notice 5 of these are 70 or bigger. Make sure that you and your homework don't click these 5 and make them purple with white letters. Make sure you definitely put your conditional formatting rule that stands out, because if you had thousands of employees, you wouldn't want to look through them each week. So we now want to change our column width. If you're noticing, we can't still see everyone's name. So what we're going to do here this week is highlight the letters, the column letters. Notice my arrow up here kind of turns it green. I want you to click your mouse, hold down your mouse on A, and then don't let go, highlight B, don't let go, highlight C. So we actually have these 3 highlighted. So we drag the column headings A, B, and C. And we're going to point at the boundary of any of 3 of them, but I'm going to click on the boundary of C. You get this 2-sided arrow. Do you all see with my mouse right now if I lay it right between C and D? What we want to do is we're going to double click really fast, and kind of reminds me of Little Caesars. You know how fast they say pizza, pizza? We're going to click our mouse that fast twice. So 1, 2. And what that does, you say, well, they made them 3 different widths. Yes. This is called auto fit. It finds the longest word, like in this case, Jermaine Hanfield. That's a long name. So it automatically found the longest word and auto fit it so it doesn't get cut off. It auto fit his email, and in this case, auto fit average down here to make sure these are set up properly. Hey, next, we are going to highlight, in this case, to go over our different columns. So what I want you to do next is we are going to highlight D, hold down Control, E, and I. So we now have D, E, and I selected right now. And we're going to drag any of these 3. It doesn't matter because they're all selected. I'm just going to go between D and E. And I am going to click that 2-sided arrow. Right now my width says like 8.47. I am going to go to about 10.5. So keep playing with it until it's 10.50. I got to get it just right. So let me make it 10.5. And if you're having trouble getting it just right, let me teach you a little trick. You can right click on any column and go down to column width and make sure it is exactly 10.50, because you know Sam is picky. So make sure all 3 of these column widths are 10.50. That was D, E, and I. So to make sure we get that just right. Okay, now the numbers in between we want to also do here. So we want to highlight F and G, and then hold down Control, hold down, in this case, J and K. And we want to make sure these column widths are all 11.13. So get those all set up. Now I want to show you sometimes what occurs here. Do you see this little number sign here? I've got mine really zoomed up, so I doubt you're seeing it. If you ever get one of these little number signs straight across, it just means your column width or your zoom is so big that it can't see all the numbers and it doesn't want to cut some of them off. When I zoom it back to normal, it's fine, but that just means your column width is not correct there. We also can change the row height. So I can come over here to row 3 in this case. I can drag it up and down till it says 39, and I could do row height by right-clicking on it. This one we want to make sure has the row height of 39. Go ahead and hit OK. And you want to make sure that heading 14 is also, click on row 14, right click. Let's go to the row height that we also have that one set to 24. So we've got those going on here. So it's starting to look pretty good. We always want to check spelling. So we can do so under the review tab, check spelling. It may fuss at you on some of the names, so skip past those, but double check that you spelled employee correctly and all the other words there. If you were printing the worksheet, you could see what it would look down here with page layouts as well. We also may want to change the margins here. Let's go into the page layout. If you want to change the margins that they're not super thick and everything fits on the same page, I'm going to pick narrow right here. And that way, when it goes to print, we can make sure that it prints well. We can pick narrow. We can also go to orientation and pick landscape so that it prints wider than taller if we were to print this out. So that way it'll do a really nice job here. So we can kind of see that as we go along. So the book goes through to show you how to print a worksheet. We won't be actually printing here. So now we can get these things displayed properly. If we were printing, let me just show you. If I went to File and Print, notice what it looks like now because I have these columns a little bit thinner. I've got it wider here. And I can even go down to scaling and fit the sheet onto one page. That way, everything will look a little bit nicer here. So it doesn't have that little extra go on to the second page. So we can also have that put together there. So this kind of concludes our page. So we can get everything refit back so that it looks really nice. So to finish up here, make sure that you double check all your values before you turn it into SAM. Save it as the correct name in SAM. But you guys, we're kicking it up. Next week is our most challenging week of the semester. So really start early when you do next week's and this week's assignment, just so you're doing a great job there. So take care, guys.